The UK left the EU on January 31st in 2020 after a referendum in 2016 in which 52% of voters of the day voted to leave. The decision to leave the EU was controversial, and there has been much debate about the potential impact of Brexit on the UK economy and its relationship with the EU. Now, Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, made comments suggesting that the UK could potentially rejoin the European Union in the future. She stated that she believed the UK was on a clear direction of travel towards rejoining the bloc, and that it was up to the younger generation to fix the mistake of Brexit. Well, as you can imagine, Rishi Sunak, the British Prime Minister, quickly rejected von der Leyen's comments, and he said that the UK was focused on delivering the benefits of Brexit and that the government had no plans to rejoin the EU. Well, this government definitely doesn't. Sunak's comments were echoed by other senior Conservative ministers, including Foreign Secretary James Cleverly and Brexit Opportunities Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg. And Cleverly said that the UK was not interested in rejoining the EU and that the government was determined to make Brexit work. And Rees-Mogg said von der Leyen's comments were completely out of touch with reality and that the UK was better off outside the EU. Well, von der Leyen is definitely out of touch with Rees-Mogg's special own reality. And the Tory in a heated debate in the House of Commons, Tory MP Jill Mortimer earlier sharply criticized Britain's immigration policy, as GB News reports, and after publishing impressive migration statistics, she demanded that the UK should not become part of the EU. Amid growing pressure on Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who is facing a revolt over his handling of the migration crisis, Mortimer questioned existing international treaties and conventions, and she stressed that the UK cannot accept everyone who would receive asylum under current rules. Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick praised Mortimer and stressed that there were genuine and false asylum claims, and he defended the government's strict stance on asylum applications and highlighted efforts in this area. And according to GB News, we know how to take them, the government has classified India and Georgia as safe countries of origin to facilitate the repatriation of those who arrived illegally. Jenrick underlined the need for further measures to avoid making the UK more attractive to migrants. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak admitted additional steps were needed to reduce the number of migrants in the UK, and he spoke out about the idea of limiting the number of family members that students can bring into the country. And Sunak stressed that the total number of immigrants must be reduced to a sustainable level. And according to GB News, net immigration peaked at 745,000 people in 22, prompting calls from the Conservatives for tighter immigration controls. And I can say that these numbers at least are correct. Sunak assured that he would tackle abuses of the immigration system and bring the numbers down. But according to a recent poll by YouGov, 44% of Britons believe that the UK should rejoin the EU, while 39% believe that it should not. And this represents a slight increase in support for rejoining the EU since the last poll in October 23, when 42% of Britons said they were in favor of rejoining. The poll also found that support for rejoining the EU is higher among younger Britons, with 57% of 18 to 24-year-olds saying they would vote to rejoin, compared to just 29% of those aged 65 and over. It's important to note that these are just poll results and do not necessarily reflect what would happen in a real referendum. However, they do suggest that there's a growing minority of Britons who believe that the UK should rejoin the EU. And there are a number of reasons why support for rejoining the EU may be increasing. Some people believe that Brexit has not been as beneficial as they were promised, and that the UK's economy has been negatively affected by leaving the EU. And others believe that the UK should be part of a larger trading bloc in order to compete in the global economy. And all of them are so right. It's also possible that the current cost of living crisis in the UK is making people more open to the idea of rejoining the EU. The EU has a number of measures in place to help its member states deal with economic crises, and some people believe that the UK would be better off if it were able to access these measures. And that fits in because the UK's largest retailers have warned Sunak that his government policies risk prolonging the cost of living crisis by driving up the cost of doing business on the high street. In a letter to Sunak, the British Retail Consortium, the BRC, said that the government's tax policy and the Brexit red tape were adding to the inflation problem facing businesses. And they said that the government's planned tax policies and the post-Brexit customs paperwork are all adding to all the problems here. They were complaining much more last year, of course, because of the tax rises in April of this year. But still, the government policies on the whole dealing with Brexit is not helping here at all. And that fits into all this rejoining the EU talk and everything else. The inflation is still much higher than on the continent. They were celebrating the lowering of inflation in the UK, and Rishi Sunak said he has fulfilled its promises to halve inflation this year. But looking at the Eurozone, for example, and looking at all the other G7 countries, their inflation is much lower. And the UK is still above the others' levels by the same margin as before. And this margin is majorly caused by Brexit. And with everything, people may often deny this. The Brexiteers deny a lot. But a lot is influenced by Brexit. And the UK is not doing well after leaving the EU. And some will start talking about, look at Germany, blah, blah, blah. Well, if you compare the whole year between Britain and Germany and get the full picture, that's one thing. And we at least know that our brilliant so-called traffic light coalition government is the reason for what we are going through at the moment. I mean, you just need to look at the budget discussions at the moment, and even our constitutional court interfering with their budgets. And that says more than enough about the reasons for certain things happening here in Germany. So you definitely cannot compare that with the Brexit consequences the UK is going through. And they are at definitely no excuses for anything that's happening in the UK. But one other thing I have to mention is the talk about rejoining the EU. First of all, it wouldn't be rejoining. They would have go to the full process if they want to come back to the EU. They would have to go through the full process of any new member. And all the protocols have to be fulfilled as if they were applying for the very first time. So that's why rejoining is not really the proper word for the whole thing. And the other thing is, in the end, it will not be important alone what would happen in the UK and what the UK would decide. Even if there was another referendum, and there was a referendum, however they will make it look, because there's talk now that a referendum has to be 2/3 with a 2/3 majority or whatever. It doesn't matter. Even if there is a successful referendum on joining the EU, this still wouldn't be automatically mean that they could just start the application process and everything. Every single member of the EU, all 27, have to allow that. And honestly, at the moment, I do not see that all 27 would agree to the UK joining the EU again. Because if you listen to what came from the kingdom towards the continent in the years since the Brexit negotiations started at the latest. We in German would say they broke so much porcelain that that needs to be fixed, and that needs quite some time to fix. And so I wouldn't be so optimistic if everybody in the EU would agree for the UK to rejoin. But we will find out if it ever comes to this. Of course, this government is not planning any rejoining. And Starmer already said in the run-up to the elections that he's not even thinking about rejoining. So we will see how it will develop over time. I don't see the UK joining the EU again in the near future, and I don't see any party trying that at all. But we will see what happens when the younger generation gets older and there's a new young generation that has never seen the benefits of the EU. Things might change again, but this is a story that will go on for years, I'm absolutely sure. And if you want to see something else, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.